This is episode 2082 of the Daily Meditation Podcast. I'm Mary Meckley, and here you are showing up for yourself. It's one of the best things you could do for yourself when you sit down to give yourself a few minutes or longer of peace, energy, and clarity. In today's episode, we launch into a brand new theme. We always explore a theme for an entire week. We start a new episode every Sunday. We finalize it on Saturday. Each week is a brand new meditation experience. And this week is going to be an exploration of how to survive uncertainty. There's plenty of uncertainty going around as we endure a global pandemic. And I have a special guest on today's episode. I don't usually do interviews, but when this guest reached out to me, his name is Joseph Hamer, I couldn't resist because I thought that this would be so helpful as we begin a school year unlike any other. So right now, lots of children are going back to school. Some children are already in school, while others will soon be starting their school year, either at home or at school. Every area differs. In the United States, where I live, students in most states have the choice to either do virtual e-school or they can go to school. It's going to be a different school year, and no one's really sure how it will turn out. College students are also going back to school. I have a son who just took off yesterday for his sophomore year. And so we are not sure what things will look like a month from now or even several months from now. We're all adapting as best as we can. But we have a new frontline worker, and that is teachers. Teachers are at school for the students who are physically showing up to school. And they often don't have a choice as to whether or not they feel safe being there, even if they have special vulnerabilities that expose them to maybe a more serious condition with the coronavirus. And many children have to go to school because their parents are working, they're not able to stay home with them. So there's a lot happening right now. And we know children are so important to our communities. They are our future. So it's important to pay attention to what's going on right now and to realize what's happening in the schools. Whether you have children or not, you're going to be guided using meditation techniques this week that have you becoming better at managing uncertainty. You'll hear in the interview what he suggests children do, and you will smile because you're probably going to be thinking to yourself, yeah, actually, I could do that too. That would help me out. I'll be sharing many techniques this whole week to help you out. With that, I hope you enjoy today's interview. I have a special guest here for you, and this is someone who is going to give us a little glimpse into what it's like to navigate the uncertainty and the pandemic we're experiencing today with children. And this is a teacher, a second grade teacher in a classroom, just getting ready to start school in a few days. And his name is Joseph Hamer. And Joseph reached out to me to let me know about a book that he wrote. And this is a book that helps parents and other people to help their children. And the book is called Brain Awakes. It's a new activity book for parents and children to empower children through breath, balance, and reflection. So, Joseph actually does yoga and meditation in the classroom with his students. So, he's teaching them important skills, life skills, as well as educational skills. And with this book, he is hoping to have people really know how to help our children today. So I'm really excited to have Joseph here because I feel like there's so much controversy going on around should schools open, should they not open? And here we have a teacher in a classroom who's written a book that might really help this situation, at least to help the lucky children and families who are going to be part of his classroom this year. So, Joseph, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Mary. Those are just really kind words. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here and to share with you and to share with others a little bit more about Brain Awakes, but most importantly, just to encourage our communities to kind of keep our heads up and stay positive about what's to come. So.
So true. Well, I want to ask you about, of course, the inspiration and motivation to write your book. So, did you start this book pre COVID or did you do it afterwards?
Yeah, so um, I started my own journey of awareness with meditation and mindfulness in 2017. In 2018, I went to a trauma informed kind of training, and I had this connection because I noticed that the 20 minutes of social emotional learning that I was doing in my classroom each day just it wasn't enough to make that learning really stick. The learning kind of just stopped after that 20-minute time, and so I at that trauma informed training I just started thinking what can I do more outside of this 20-minute gap to help my children gain these life skills, to gain more awareness of themselves and others. And so I began teaching my children um, these additional skills through daily mindfulness activities. And I always did it after lunch recess as a way to kind of re regulate them, to get their minds ready to learn again, and then also have that extra little communication and amongst themselves and with me. And so once I started doing this, I saw this transformational impact in the classroom community. And year after year, that I was doing it, I saw the same thing of just it building a more connected community, and our students were compassionate for one another and more aware. And so I knew that I had to make a resource to help other parents and teachers be able to cultivate a similar type of community in their homes or their classrooms. And so that was in 2018 where I had this idea, and it never came, it never blossomed until actually in March. Um, I reached out to a girl that I went to Emporia State with and during my elementary education time, and I knew she was teaching kids yoga now in Santa Barbara, California. And I reached out to her again, and both of us were quarantined at home. We both have this major passion for empowering our children through these activities, and um, yeah, so we began the actual writing process in March of this year, and met the right people, and um, had everything just fall in. The timeline was extraordinary, and just got published by Waterside Productions, and um, now it's out, and I think it's out in just the perfect time for students and families to use as we begin to navigate this new normal. So.
It's so true, especially for children because they're in their formative years. And so this is going to really have
probably one of the biggest impacts on the children because they are right in those prime years. That makes such a big difference. I want to ask you some questions, and please jump in if there's anything you want to share from your book as well. When you think about pre-COVID, what kinds of things at that time did you see kids struggling with?
That was a really good question, and I think it is challenging because every year the group of kids always has a different strong challenge that I see throughout them. But over the past few years, I've really seen probably about three main struggles. And the biggest one is the desire to have control or the desire to have power, but they often don't find it or they aren't given it. They also have this need, this internal need for love and compassion, but when they aren't receiving it, they don't know how to communicate that need. And then lastly, I think especially right now through this time that we're living in, children are feeling such an array of emotions and they're told to handle them. They're told to be okay rather than being taught how to handle them and how to be okay. So I think the biggest way we can kind of tackle these struggles is through social emotional conversations. We really need to reflect with our children about their struggles, about their experiences, about our thoughts, about our emotions. And we need to invest that time to really be present with them and to discuss how we feel and how we know we feel that way and then where we can go from there.
Great. You gave some great suggestions. By the way, I should ask you, how long have you taught?
All right, so I've been teaching for 4 years, so this will be my fifth year coming up.
It's really unusual, I hear, to have a male in the elementary school. So, what inspired you to become an elementary school teacher?
Yeah, it was unfair when we were at job fairs and things like that. All of my friends in the program would be a little bit upset that so many districts were looking at me because I was one of two males out of this whole thing. But yeah, it is rare. Although I'll tell you what, it's been encouraging over the past couple of years. I've seen more and more males in elementary education, and it's really needed, especially for a lot of our children that are looking for that positive male role model. Going back to what made me want to be an elementary school teacher, I was in high school and I was taking community service as a high school course. It was my last semester, so I had some time to fill. And my mom worked at an elementary school, and so I decided to just pop over there and help in a class. And I really built these connections and saw these light bulbs. And I noticed when I was back in high school, I was noticing I was always looking forward to that next time going back to school. So I realized that's a major sign of something that I love. If I'm looking forward to it, even though it's just a little bit of spurt in my day. And so I decided, why not do that for, why not go to college for that? So I went to Emporia State. Through my student teaching, I just realized how much I love it and have a passion for it and have this energy and this drive in the classroom and never looked back. I've been loving it ever since. And right now I'm actually working on my master's to become a principal so that I can kind of take that community I built within my classroom and hopefully cultivate that in an entire school. So.
That's wonderful. And I should mention also that you are from Wichita, Kansas. Yeah, this is really exciting that here you've taken your time during the pandemic when we were all having to hunker down and not go anywhere, quarantine, and you wrote a book and you launched it, and here you are, right in the nick of time as school's getting ready to start. I want to ask you also if you can provide some techniques that you do in the classroom that are really helpful that parents, so many parents who are staying home now, and many of them homeschooling their children, what kind of techniques have worked really well for you that you would pass along to parents?
Sure, that's so good. And man, I hope I pull out the right golden gem here for you. But a huge thing for me is empathy. And so I think the largest thing that I do in my classroom is I take the time when I see both the good and the bad happening, and I take the time to point it out and discuss it. So if I see a student help another student pick up some pencils or crayons that they dropped, I'll go over there real quick and just say, wow, why are you helping them pick it up? And then I'll look at the other person and say, how does it make you feel that this person's helping you? And then I'll look back at them and say, how do you feel while you're helping them? But the same is true when I hear somebody say something unkind. I ask them, why did they feel like they needed to say something that was unkind? And then I ask the other person, how did you feel when they said something unkind to you? Because it's important. I do think we act so quickly sometimes, we really don't think about the consequences that follow it. So I think both the good and the bad, that's the biggest thing that I think pays off, is just helping kids become aware of what we do and how it makes us feel, and then noticing too, man, I don't like when my heart feels heavy. I don't like when my stomach feels this way because I know I did something wrong. But what I do like is smiling because I made someone smile, and that's contagious. And so it's definitely not like an instant thing, but just those gradual conversations are really powerful. Um, and then I do want to share one activity out of my book, if that's okay with you here.
Yes.
So this activity is called Friends Have Feelings. And I wrote this one to really build on empathy. So if you don't mind, I'll kind of run through this activity with you. Is that okay, Mary?
Absolutely. I love that.
All
Yes.
right. All right. So first, we'll sit tall, we'll close our eyes, and we're going to imagine one of our best friends. So just picture their face, feel them there. Now, I want you to imagine, how would they look if they were feeling sad? Just look at them, notice their feeling. How would they sound if they were feeling mad? It's okay, just listen and let it go. How would you know if your best friend was feeling nervous? How could you tell that? All right, now look at your best friend, and how would you know if they were feeling super happy? Do you look the same way when you're feeling that emotion? Take a deep breath in and out. Open your eyes when you're ready. And I want to ask you, how did you know, or how do you know the way a friend is feeling? What are some ways that you can know a way a friend is feeling? And then the next question, after you have that discussion with them, is how do you feel? How do you feel when your friend is upset? So again, you have that discussion, and I always try and hear as many different children as I can, because part of the power of reflection is all the different minds and the different feelings through it. And the last question is, what are some ways that you could help a friend if they were feeling nervous? So just going through that. And so that was pretty quick. And then we all take a deep breath in and out, and we stand up and we moved on to our next activity.
That's awesome. These are questions that are also important that we could ask ourselves in families to say, how does mom feel when she's upset? Or, what does she look like? What does she do? Or go through the family members and
Right.
just become aware of empathy in the family. It's easy to take our friends and family for granted. That's a great exercise. So your book is filled with how many exercises are there like this?
There are 78 activities. So there's 39 yoga and 39 mindfulness. And really you can pick and choose. Like if I noticed a problem with empathy in my classroom, I might go ahead and jump to that activity. But so you do have that liberty. None of them are really building on each other. But the book is intentionally written. So if you follow the path of the book, it starts with a child's inner environment. So becoming aware of themselves and their emotions, and then feeling empathy. So noticing others' emotions. And it goes on into friendships and accepting differences and other community relations. And then it ends up, the last section of the book is in goal setting. So optimism and perseverance and focusing in.
I love that structure. And, just as I mentioned, that these are things that we could do. I feel like our society sort of needs to be rebuilt with values and all of these things. That's a great way to structure your book for children. They are going to really enjoy you this year. You're going to be so helpful for the parents. In your opinion, what is the most important thing that you wish parents would do to support their children? You mentioned to teach them to have empathy or compassion, or to how to self-soothe so that they could calm themselves. What are some other things that you really wish parents knew?
Yeah, so I think I think empathy really is the biggest thing that I want to talk about. And it's because through empathy, you understand how you are feeling and you understand how those around you may feel. Through empathy, you gain this sense of compassion and understanding. You find forgiveness for yourself when you do something wrong, and you find forgiveness for others. I feel like empathy is this key that unlocks the ability to be connected and compassionate in our community. Like you said, this is really an opportunity for us to step back and realize what's important to us. Where do we go from here? And in this time that all of us have been in crisis mode, what has been our saving? What has been what kept our chins up? And so to me, I think empathy is something that it must be taught. It's not something that's easily picked up. And it's something that we also have to model for our children. And I think sometimes as adults, we've gained this sense of empathy, but we forget that that's come from years and years of seeing emotions. And so if we take that time to just intentionally talk with our children about our feelings, about how we know we're having those feelings, how we know others are having those feelings, and the best way to navigate them. And it's not about saying you don't want to feel angry, but how do you know you feel angry? Where do you feel your anger at? And when you feel angry, what's something you could do to calm yourself?
Mhm.
And um, same thing with being overly excited. I think we take our awareness for granted occasionally. And so I think remembering that we really have to teach and model this for our children is the biggest thing, especially coming back to school after a pandemic where everybody has experienced this storm differently.
Yeah, just before the interview, we were talking about how you were wondering how you're going to kind of merge the students who parents, it's been okay to touch people, and then the parents whose or the children whose parents have really social distanced. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so for me, I'm going to start day one, just like any other time of the year, of laying down our foundation. And that I always have one rule, and it's teach you or treat each other the way you want to be treated. That's the only rule in my classroom. And with that rule, though, you have to have this discussion. And on day one, it's important to have this discussion of, well, how do we want to be treated? and how do we not want to be treated? Because that rule, that saying, treat others the way you want to be treated, does no good if there's not a communication of what that really looks like. So
Mhm.
I think for me, it's just like when a kid starts out tackling and beating up on their friend, or girls start braiding each other's hair, and we have to have this conversation about a difference between being at school and being at home, especially right now during COVID. So it's going to be about establishing that at home, you may do something differently, but here in school, to keep our friends safe, we're going to stay this far apart. Or something that's going to be really important is that we don't get up and share supplies. Like you won't be able to go borrow your friend's crayons like you normally would. So it's just going to be about discussing those things and giving children grace when they mess up, and giving ourselves grace when we make that mistake.
There's so many things going on right now. So school is mandatory to go to the classroom in Kansas, where you live. Children will be going back to school, or is it a choice?
So in my district in Wichita, parents have three choices. They can enroll their child in person, they can enroll their child remotely, which is the same hours as the same teachers that are in our district. It's just from them learning at home. And the third option is an e-academy, which is totally online and gives them the liberty to work and what hours fit best for them. So right now, as a teacher, I don't know what I'm teaching yet, online or in person, until enrollment numbers come through. So um, right now, I'm just mentally preparing and thinking about both avenues and making sure that I'm prepared for either direction.
I even wonder what it's going to be like when they're eating lunch. Lunchtime is usually, and recess, and all these times when they're used to interacting and
Yeah, so lunch now is going to be in our classrooms, and even specials, PE, art, music, all of those are going to be taking place either in our classroom or outside if the weather permits. So that's another thing is I am I've been thinking about the rainy days or the cold days where we have indoor recess, and those kids that are not supposed to be up running around the room are going to be essentially stuck in their little space for the entire school day. So in my mind, I'm trying to think the activities in the book I just put out, but also other activities that allow students to get up and moving and talking from a safe distance. It's We're going to be taking more brain breaks than ever before, just because I don't. It's going to be there'll need to be a lot of creativity going into this year. So.
yeah. From your book, you're teaching them yoga, which is movement, and they don't have to move around. But I'm sure that they'll be flipping and doing things like that.
They
But
will be moving. It's just that we don't want
yeah,
them to be. So,
yeah, I know. Just allowing them to relax and breathe.
You might notice that they are feeling.
Worn out, like a lot of us are. I'm going to be helping to teach and homeschool the neighbors across the street. They have two little boys. My children are raised, but I'm going to help like do art and little science projects with them. We're going to social distance and all of that as well. But I was thinking, and I'm going to teach them meditation and yoga also. So I was thinking how I would just gradually get them used to sitting comfortably. In meditation and yoga, it's really hard to calm your mind and body if you're not comfortable physically.
yeah, so definitely what you said about that gradual, I mean, that is so true. Even for reading time, you can't start out with a 20-minute reading time. And same with our mindfulness and activities. I can't expect them to go for a full 5 minutes of sitting and breathing. I can't teach them belly breathing and expect them to do that for the entire time. So, like you said, it's going to be this gradual. And I think that goes for everything. I can't expect my kids to be sitting at their new desk where they definitely haven't been sitting at desks at home since March. So staying sit in this one place is going to be something else where we're going to have to be able to get up and do a stretch, or get up and run in place and sit back down. Even if it's for a quick break, everything's going to be gradual. Um, I think, like you said, laying that foundation is critical. And so we talk about the word foundation a lot in education. And moving in, there's more to the foundation, like you said, as an emotional foundation too, of setting this tone of we're in a place that's safe. And maybe you have anxiety right now when you leave your home, but here we're going to keep each other safe, and we're going to be kind, and we're going to help each other and be uplifting. And even though I'm over here, I can still help you and I can still support you. So laying that foundation of, in the past, I mean, kids love to hug their teachers or run up and those high fives and those moments. And now I'm still going to be smiling. It's just going to be covered by a mask, but I'm going to make sure my children still feel that.
Yeah, you provided such a wonderful ritual just with their own emotions, and notice the emotions of others, and how does that make them feel, and how do they think that person feels when they're feeling that. That is definitely going to be helpful. And this also can be a time of such great opportunity, reconnect to our values and what's important to us, and to be able to sit still and not have to venture out and not have to be so entertained by the outside world. So to begin to appreciate your inner stillness and your quiet times. And I don't think that we've had to really ever be in a situation where we're really having to do that for coping skills. And now people are realizing how valuable it is to be able to sit still and feel this inner peace and enjoy it. And so, for the children that you're with, I'm sure that they're going to just learn so much from you this year. And is there anything else you'd like to share with us about your book?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll share, first, I could share one more activity, if that's all right, to help
Love that.
parents and teachers to. One of the activities I love to teach my kids is a regulation technique. And so this one is called Five Fingers, Five Breaths. But essentially, I have the kids open up their hand like a number five. And what we do is first we just trace our hand. So I'll show them what that means, like when we trace something else. So we'll go through and we'll trace our hand. And then I'll tell them this time we're going to trace our hand again, but we're going to follow our breath. So when we breathe in, we go up. When we breathe out, we go down. And then when we breathe in, we go up. And out, we go down. So in. So this one here, the reason I love this specific one is it guarantees 5 breaths. It has this motor skill involved that really makes the children involved with their breathing. They notice when it begins and when it ends. And a secret little motivation for me when I teach this is seeing kids do this without me. So seeing them at their desk when they're frustrated or nervous, or seeing them outside in a situation where they're not happy, or even coming to me like, I need to take my 5 breaths. And seeing them do that is a moment where you know what you're doing is finally sticking. You know, it's making that impact. And I feel like so many times as teachers, we don't always get those moments because we're just planting these seeds and we're only with them for a year. So seeing this activity specifically is always wonderful, to have a visual reminder that you're making an impact, and we're teaching these skills how to regulate and recognize their emotions.
Wow, that's awesome. For the listeners there, we are recording this on video, but um, for those who are listening on the podcast, what Joseph was doing is he held up his hand, 5 fingers, and he, with his other hand, on the inhale, would trace starting with his thumb, and then he would inhale to the top of his thumb, and then as he exhaled, he'd slide his finger down the other side of his thumb, and then as he inhaled again, he would trace his pointing finger, and as he would exhale, he would trace back down. So maybe we could get this and I could post it on
Facebook or Instagram.
because
Yeah.
that is an excellent technique. I like how it does use the motor skills as well as your breath, which is so important. And you have to really focus when you do it.
How about a special technique for fear and anxiety?
With anxiety, it's so tricky because anxiety is something that affects so much of us. Our whole body feels anxious. So, in telling someone, like I was saying before, we can't just tell someone, "Oh, don't worry, this coming up." And rather, I think for me, it's just about the breaths and trusting. I have some mantras throughout the book, and so one is "I am here" and "I am peace," and just reciting that. And for me, it does mean when I see a kid that's feeling anxious, and a lot of times in my past, students start feeling anxious is when the behaviors are going to be happening. They start getting antsy and they feel it. They just don't recognize that they're starting to get this way. So it's about launching my kids so that everyone else is busy and just sitting with them and taking that quick minute to say, I noticed that you were moving around a lot and getting bouncy. How are you feeling? And lots of times they can't verbalize, oh, I'm feeling anxious, but they'll say, I feel like I need to move. And I say, oh, what do your hands feel like? And often they're sweaty. What does your heart feel like? And I say, okay, when I feel this way, because I feel like you do sometimes also, what I do is remind myself that this here is a peaceful moment. So I breathe in and tell myself I am here. And when I breathe out, I tell myself I am peace. And I'll sit and do that with them, just maybe 2 breaths through. And I'll say, I hope this helps you. And if you still feel like that, come to me. I can try and help you through this emotion. And then I go back to still teaching. And maybe they sit there for a minute, or maybe they don't, or maybe they still do whatever crazy behavior they were feeling like doing. But it's just about planting those seeds. And I think with anxiety, it's about verbalizing it and not being afraid to share that you're anxious. So, especially with our kids, I think there's so many high expectations, which is wonderful, and they thrive in high expectations, but they also have to know that we all feel this emotion, and the only way to get past it is to go through it. And that's what I really do love about your meditations is the way you really slowly go through things. I think we're so fast paced sometimes that we don't sit long enough with our thoughts. And so that's something that I've really enjoyed when I listen with you is taking the time to be patient with myself and taking that time to really care for myself and listen to myself is a big word I heard you say was listen. Um, we just have to remember to give ourselves love and give ourselves grace and especially with our children. They need us now more than ever, but we have to remember it really does take a village. We can't do it on our own. So reaching out to each other, checking in with each other, and knowing that when we're with one another, that we should try to be present and not caught up in our phone or whatever else is distracting us at the moment.
That's wonderful. Joseph, I wish you well. I know all the listeners here are just rooting for you and so grateful that you really focused to share what you saw people might need to help with their children. Yeah, can you please tell us where to find your book and where to find out more information about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can reach out to me at brainawakes.com. And of course, you can also find that new activity book there, Brain Awakes. But on that website, there's good ways to reach out to us. There is a spotlight. So I'm looking for others that are shining bright in our communities that we can do on there. And just some other resources through from other organizations and authors that are doing good things in our community. But I would love to hear from you and try and help you with your questions and collaborate as we navigate this uncharted time in our lives.
Whether we're a teacher or a parent, we all really feel for the children and teachers, all the frontline workers. Congratulations on your book, and thank you for sharing your book with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a privilege. I'm really honored to be here and sharing what I have to offer. And I'm really happy to be a part of anybody's community that needs it to grow.